So dear beloved Compassionate Ocean Sangha, it's such a joy to be together. Here we are on the evening of the 26th of July in the year 2020. I do hope everybody is doing well, that you're safe and at ease wherever you might be. Here in the Blue Mountains at Mountain Spring Monastery, we're enjoying a day of rain. There's heavy and solid rain falling down, and today, during our day of mindfulness, we had an experience of just sitting and listening to the rain. We opened the doors of our meditation hall and we opened our senses of hearing, we opened our smell, we opened our eyes, we opened the sensations of the body to the sound of the rain. It's a very beautiful and welcome experience to have rain here on this land that's so parched. Today we had about 20 friends from Wake Up between the ages of 18 and 35 coming together to practice here. And it was so joyful. It was really like a family reunion. And I realized something that as we experienced this day of being together, and we, in the afternoon, Wake Up friends and Sanghas associated with Wake Up had prepared gratitude baskets for Brother Tenzin and myself here, filled with beautiful gifts that the Sangha thought that we would need, gifts of candles, gifts of sage, gifts of some medicinal tonics and so on, which was absolutely lovely. There was also poems and letters of gratitude. It was so moving to receive those and to read them. But then also there were gifts based on Dharma talks or sharings that we'd offered. And so I realized that I have to be quite careful with the things that I share because people remember the stories. And so I'll definitely be aware of the stories that I tell. And for those of you who've been watching for a while, you'll recall the story of myself being in Trader Joe's, which is a supermarket well known in the United States for selling natural foods. They're a really great, a great chain. And as I was there, I was in the checkout line and I was paying for the community's groceries with some change that I had there, trying to get rid of change. And the person behind was a little frustrated and they said, "Oh, I hate getting caught behind basic Buddhists." So they were thinking that that was an insult for me, but which it might have been for other people, but I considered it to be a badge of pride, a badge of honor to be called basic, because the opposite of basic is being complicated. And as a Buddhist practitioner, I strive to be basic. I strive to be simple. I strive to be to bring this sense of bare awareness to what is. And so today, one of our friends offered a calligraphy that we're going to put near our shrine here. It says "Basic Buddhist and Proud." So I was so happy when I received this today. It's definitely going to go at the foot of our shrine. Our teacher Tay was all about breathing, which is the basic of the Plum Village practice. And if we cultivate breathing, then we're also cultivating a sense of basic awareness, a sense of bare awareness. So I feel if we combine breathing and bare awareness, that is a powerful and transformative practice. So I'm really proud to have this calligraphy, Basic Buddhist and Proud. So it's my hope that all of us as practitioners will become more basic and less complicated. So this evening, we're continuing with our reflections on the ethics section, within the ethics section of the Noble Eightfold Path. Last week, we looked at right speech. And this week, we're going to continue our reflections and begin our reflections on right action as the second factor of the ethics section. There are 3 factors in the ethics section of the Noble Eightfold Path. So I'd like to share with you one thing that I mentioned last week. I really want to make sure that it's in our consciousness, in our heart and mind, as we begin our contemplation, our exploration of right action. As we continue this exploration, let's remember that although the principles in the ethics section focus on our inner and outer conduct, please remember that the ultimate aim of ethics in Buddhism is not only ethics for ethics' sake, but ethics are seen as foundational. They're seen as essential practices to transform our mind and our heart. In Buddhism, it's actually seen that there can't be any real spiritual path without an ethical dimension. So honoring the precepts of sila, or having this embodied practice of ethics, is actually considered to be a great gift, or in Pali, a mahadana, to ourselves and to others, because it creates an atmosphere of trust, of mutual respect and security. It also means that we as a practitioner, we don't pose any threat to ourselves or to another person, to their life, to their property, to their family, to their rights, and to their well-being. And this is truly a great gift. It's not something that's a given in our current situation. So in some ways, it might be helpful to consider sila, or the factor of right action, as a practice of developing a sense of inner and outer skillfulness, learning to engage skillfully with what is, or more skillfully with what is. When we consider the Western philosophical tradition that many of us emerge from, we've inherited the idea that wisdom comes from a whole lot of thinking and analysis, a whole lot of energy up here above our ears. And so with this concept, or this framework as a background, Buddhism, or the approach of Buddhism, is quite radical. The Buddha tells us that it's not through the usual way of thinking that wisdom, that prajna emerges, but through training our attention so as to become carefully and continuously aware of each and every moment, and through training in that quality of attention that we call mindfulness. In each and every moment, wisdom emerges, that we create the conditions for wisdom to emerge. When we generate that careful attentiveness, that loving attentiveness of mindfulness, then the ways that we think, we act, and we speak naturally begin to transform. It all comes together. I've shared before that ethical practice, ethical conduct, is seen to be central to the Buddhist path. And this is quite interesting when we consider what most people think about Buddhism. They think that meditation is the central aspect of the Buddhist path. So for me to share with you that, in fact, this ethical dimension is seen as the central or foundational aspect of the Buddhist path can seem like quite a different take. But really, for any meditative development, as we mentioned last week, to be well-rooted and to be well-developed, it's seen to be necessary to cultivate, in conjunction with the other factors of the path, this ethical dimension, this way of understanding that we interact with others, that we're always in relationship to others. So ethics is a firm foundation for, and both a manifestation of, wisdom. It's both at the same time. It can sometimes be confusing, or might even seem like a value judgment, when we begin thinking of some things as right and perhaps putting other things in the column of wrong, just as if we consider basic to be one extreme, then another extreme might be complicated. So we can have a tendency to be a little confused, because it can seem, when we approach ethics, that we're looking at things in quite stark ways. So one way to approach this question, which is an important one, could be by bringing mindful awareness to noticing the mindsets or emotional states that motivate us to act or to think in certain ways. I personally have noticed that if I pay attention, if I bring mindfulness to my experience, then things such as generosity, compassion, and so on, they feel good. And when I tune into my experience, anger or ill will and so on, they feel, well, not so great. And if we're not feeling great, it's pretty likely that others are not feeling so great either. They're probably feeling quite similarly. The Buddha tells us, in fact, in the Majjhima Nikaya, for those of you who'd like to look it up, it's number 117. The Buddha tells us that right view is the starting point, the foundation of every single beneficial state that we can imagine. It's with this foundation of right view that a practitioner knows unskillful action as unskillful action and skillful action as skillful action. And what is unskillful action? The Buddha continues. Killing, taking what's not given, and unmindful sexuality, harmful sexuality. This is wrong action. This is unskillful action. There are so many lists given in the Buddhist text dividing actions of body, speech, and mind into those that are wholesome and those that are not yet wholesome. But there's also a central suggestion in Buddhism that I think is really important. And that is that the Dharma has a quality that we call a come and see quality, come and see for yourself quality, and an experience for yourself quality, ehipassiko. You need to experience it for yourself. And in fact, in one famous discourse, the discourse to the Kalamas, the Buddha shares quite directly that when you know for yourselves that these qualities are skillful, blameless, praised by the wise, these qualities, when adopted and carried out, lead to my welfare and the welfare of others and to their happiness, then you should enter in and remain in them. And this comes through directing this energy that we call mindfulness, looking at each and every moment as it arises and considering our motivations. And considering, when we notice our motivations, considering how they feel for ourselves. Do we actually feel, when we engage in a certain action, does it feel good? How does it feel? Or does it feel kind of a little strained, a little negative perhaps? I have a sense that beginning this week's reflections on right action, some of us are probably feeling very excited. Finally, some of you are thinking, there's something to do. There's going to be something to do after all of this talking and all of this self-reflection. Now, finally, we're getting into action. But let's face it, we're often humans doing rather than humans being. As I was reflecting on right action this week, in preparation for this coming week of reflection and practice around right action, I remembered an essay that I read a few years ago that I really loved. It's called The Disease of Being Busy. It's by an author called Omid Safi. It was written in 2014. For those of you who would like to read that essay, I'll post it up in the Compassionate Ocean Sangha Facebook group. So here's an excerpt from the essay, which is probably worth reading in full. It's really quite a lovely essay. And it seems to me that many aspects are as true, if not even more true now than they were in 2014, which is interesting and also in some ways a little concerning. So he writes, I saw a dear friend a few days ago. I stopped by to ask her how she was doing, how her family was. She looked up, voice lowered, and just whimpered, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I have so much going on. Almost immediately after, I ran into another friend and I asked him how he was. Again, same tone, same response. I'm just so busy. I've got so much to do. The tone was exasperated, tired, even overwhelmed. And it's not just adults. When we moved to North Carolina about 10 years ago, we were thrilled to be moving to a city with a great school system. We found a diverse neighborhood filled with families. Everything felt good, felt right. After we settled in, we went to one of the friendly neighbors asking if their daughter and our daughter could get together and play. The mother, a really lovely person, reached for her phone and pulled out the calendar function. She scrolled, and scrolled and scrolled. She finally said she has a 45-minute opening 2.5 weeks from now. The rest of the time is gymnastics, piano, and voice lessons. She's just so busy. Horribly destructive habits start early, really early. How did we end up living like this? Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we do this to our children? When did we forget that we are human beings, not human doings? Whatever happened to a world in which kids get muddy, get dirty, get messy, and heavens get bored? Do we have to love our children so much that we overschedule them, making them stressed and busy just like us? What happened to a world in which we can sit with the people we love so much and have slow conversations about the state of our heart and mind, conversations that slowly unfold, conversations with pregnant pauses and silences that we are in no rush to fill? How did we create a world in which we have more and more to do with less time for leisure, less time for reflection, less time for community, less time to just be? Somewhere we read the unexamined life is not worth living for a human. How are we supposed to live, to examine, to be, to become, to be fully human when we are so busy? The disease of being busy, and let's call it what it is, the dis-ease of being busy when we're never at ease, is spiritually destructive to our health and well-being. It saps our ability to be fully present with those we love the most in our families and keeps us from forming the kind of community that we all so desperately crave. Since the 1950s, we've had so many new technological innovations that we thought or were promised would make our lives easier, faster, and simpler. Yet we have no more free or leisurely time today than we did decades ago. For some of us, the privileged ones, the lines between work and home have become blurred. We are on our devices all the time. Smartphones and laptops mean that there is no division between the office and home. And this is particularly true in this current situation we're in during the pandemic. There is no division between the office and home for many of us. When the kids are in bed, we are back online. The old models, including that of a nuclear family with one parent working outside of the home, if indeed it ever existed, have passed away for most of us. We now have a majority of families being single families or where both parents are working outside of the home. It doesn't have to be this way. It's not working. In many Muslim cultures, when you want to ask them how they're doing, you ask in Arabic, kefalik. In other words, how is your hal? What is this hal that you inquire about? It's the transient state of one's heart. In reality, when we ask that question, kefalik, we ask, how is your heart doing at this very moment, at this breath? When I ask, how are you? That's really what I want to know. I'm not asking how many items are on your to-do list, nor asking how many items are in your inbox. I want to know how your heart is doing at this very moment. Tell me. Tell me your heart is joyous. Tell me your heart is aching. Tell me your heart is sad. Examine your own heart, explore your spirit, and then tell me something about your heart and your soul. Tell me you remember that you're still a human being, not just a human doing. Tell me that you're more than just a machine, checking off items from your to-do list. Have that conversation. Have that glance. Be a healing conversation, one filled with grace and presence. Look me in the eye and connect with me for just 1 second. Tell me something about your heart and awaken my heart. Help me remember that I too am a full and complete human. I teach at a university where many students pride themselves on the study hard, play hard lifestyle. This might be a reflection of many of our lifestyles and our busyness, that even our means of relaxation is itself a reflection of that same world of overstimulation. Our relaxation often takes the form of action-filled yet mindless films or violent and fast-paced sports. I don't have any magical solutions. All I know is that we're losing the ability to live a truly human life. We need a different relationship to work, to technology. We know what we want: a meaningful life, a sense of community, and a balanced existence. It's not just about leaning in or faster iPhones. We want to be truly human. Yeats once wrote, "It takes more courage to examine the dark corners of your own soul than it does for a soldier to fight on a battlefield." How exactly are we supposed to examine the dark corners of our soul when we're so busy all of the time? How are we supposed to live the examined life? I wonder if we're willing to have the structural conversation necessary about how to do that, how to live like that. Somehow we need a different model of organizing our lives, our societies, our families, our communities. I want my kids to be dirty, messy, even bored, learning to become human. I want us to have a kind of existence where we can pause, look each other in the eye, touch each other, and inquire together, "Here is how my heart is doing. I'm taking the time to reflect on my own existence. I'm in touch enough with my own heart and soul to know how I fare, and I know how to express the state of my heart." So how is the state of your heart today? Let's insist on a type of human-to-human connection where when one of us responds by saying, "I'm just so busy," we can follow up by saying, "I know, beloved, we all are, but I want to know how your heart is doing." As we move into this contemplation on right action, I wanted to begin by sharing this beautiful essay because I feel it gives us an important perspective as we move into what might seem to be quite a lot of things to do. And I feel if we're going to be considering what we're going to be doing and engaging in, we also need to be considering the other side of this aspect of action. And that's the action of non-action, which for many of us in our modern society is actually a greater challenge. We're quite conditioned to do and to do all the time. So before I move on, I'd like to save you and me an extra email and just mention that the essay will be posted in the Compassionate Ocean Sangha Facebook group, so you can find it there. So you will not need to send me an email. In fact, knowing what we need to do, and sometimes equally importantly, what we don't need to do, is a manifestation of insight. In fact, the phrase, "I have done what needed to be done," is often repeated in the text. And I think each of us would do very well by reflecting on what needs to be done in our lives and what doesn't need to be done. What's really not so necessary, and what is the real heartwood of what we need to do. In fact, it was Master Rinzai, one of the great Zen teachers, who said the ultimate aim of meditation practice is to become a businessless person with nothing more to do, to have done everything, to be somebody with no agenda other than to be fully present in the moment. So when we begin to contemplate right action, It's quite humbling, isn't it? How to truly behave in a way that benefits self and others. How humbling it is to pause for a moment and to ask ourselves fully whether something is going to be of benefit for ourselves and others or not. Truthfully, we can only do our very best in every moment. And yet it's humbling at the same time to take a moment to pause and consider, even as an exercise, when I reflect back on this moment in a year's time, will it have been a skillful action? Or in 3 years' time? Or in 5 years' time? And when we do that, at least for me, I've come to that understanding that we can only do the best that we can in each moment, deeply rooted in our aspiration and rooted in the following aspects of right action. And if we operate from that place of deep aspiration, proper intentionality, loving kindness and care, then we will have done the best that we could do. We can only do our very best in each moment, and it's only our very best when we're living from the heart. There's a little excerpt from the text that I'd like to read. It says, "And how do we benefit self and others in 3 ways? By bodily action. There's the case where a certain person, letting go of the taking of life, abstains from the taking of life. They dwell with the rod laid down, the knife laid down, scrupulous, merciful, compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, they abstain from taking what is not given. They do not take in the manner of a thief things in a village or in a wilderness that belong to others and have not been given by them. Abandoning sensual misconduct, they abstain from sensual misconduct. This is how one benefits self and others in 3 ways by bodily action." And this is in the Anguttara Nikaya 10.176, for those of you who'd like to look it up. So usually right action is taught in a traditional way in terms of 3 aspects: protecting life, not taking what's given, or practicing generosity, which is the positive way of phrasing that, and behaving responsibly in sexual relationships. So let's have a look at each of these in turn. The first is protecting life, panatipata veramani, protecting life. I undertake the training of protecting life. So a practitioner avoids the taking of life without stick or sword, conscientious, full of kindness and empathy. They are full of the wish for the welfare of all living beings. So last week I mentioned the 2 aspects of Buddhist ethics: refraining from harm and acting to benefit self and others. So here in this little verse, this little excerpt, we see both of these qualities. Abstaining from taking life, of course, is much deeper than just simply refraining from killing other animals or living beings. The mindfulness training invites us to abstain, to refrain from harming or killing any sentient being. Being in Pali, panabhuta, literally means a breathing thing, everything that has a life force. But we also know that even when we're breathing in and out, there are microbes in the air. This has become real to us in this present moment, that we're taking life. So this mindfulness training helps us to become more sensitive to and aware of our actions. And we do the best that we can to not take life, knowing that even with the most mindful of step, as we take a step, there could, if we're walking on the grass, there could be an insect that's harmed or microbes that are killed. We do our very best while being realistic about our life. And we become more aware of our actions and how our actions impact others. And this is certainly something that we're becoming aware of in this current moment, when we are wearing masks, when we're near others, aware that as we breathe out and another person is breathing in, very concretely, another person is, if we're within 3 feet, 1.5 meter distance of another, then chances are likely that we're breathing in aspects of that person's out breath. That's become clear to us now. So we do the best that we can. We see our connection with others. In the first mindfulness training of Plum Village, we read, aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life. I'm committed to cultivating the insight of interbeing and compassion, and learning ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I'm determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to support any act of killing in the world, either by my thinking or my way of life. Seeing that harmful actions arise from anger, fear, greed, and intolerance, which in turn come from dualistic and discriminative thinking, I will cultivate openness, non-discrimination, and non-attachment to views in order to transform violence, fanaticism, and dogmatism in myself and in the world. This mindfulness training really covers the whole realm of protecting life within the Buddhist practice, and I feel it's a beautiful summary of this practice. Basically, traditionally, the taking of life is a deliberate destruction of the life of a being endowed with consciousness, a conscious being. That's what we mean by sentient. And this principle, or this Buddhist principle of protecting life, is grounded in the consideration that all beings love life and fear death, that all want to be happy and don't want to suffer or to be in pain. So acts of killing can be driven by the roots of greed, hatred, or ill will, or delusion, the 3 roots that we've spoken about in earlier talks. And it might be helpful to consider, if we consider moments in our own life where we've perhaps seen issues like this occur, and to see if we can identify the roots. What about thoughts? Because normally when we think about this particular aspect of right action, this aspect of protecting life, we think about acts of our body, right? We think of taking a step or hitting a living being, or perhaps, as it says in the sutra quotation, the knife or the rod and so on. We think about actions of the body. But how about thoughts such as, that person is dead to me? I also see another aspect of this training is treating ourselves or others like an object rather than a being with whom we enter into relationship. I also think another way to protect life is through our words. So we have the thought aspect of how we can consider another person like an object, another being like an object, but also our words too. They can harm, or in some ways they can, as we shared with right speech, they can create wars which bring about killing. So the whole aspect of our being, not just physical action, but also our thoughts, our words, and physical action, they go together in order to protect life, to protect the life force of ourselves and others. So this sense of seeing others or seeing other beings as an object rather than a being that has aliveness that we're in relationship with. Let's have a sound of the bell. So before we move on, if you were listening to the 3 aspects of right action that I mentioned before, you will have realized something. that the 3 aspects of right action correspond to the first 3 of the 5 mindfulness trainings. So if we would like to practice right action in a very concrete way, then basically we're taking up the training of the practice of the first 3 mindfulness trainings. So this is the framework for what we're looking into this evening. The second aspect of right action is, of course, abstaining from taking what's not given. Adinna dana. We all know the word dana. So adinna dana, abstaining from taking what's not given. Taking what's not given means taking or claiming something that rightly belongs to others. That can be material things or money, resources, especially in the modern world, resources, water, and other things, or even ideas. In the monastic world, we have a practice as monastics not to consider things as usable for us unless they've been specifically offered to us. If somebody comes to the monastery and just leaves something around, we don't consider it belonging to us or that it's been offered to us. We'll put it into a place and we'll inquire whether it belongs to somebody. Even if somebody just leaves a robe or something around, if they haven't given it to us or haven't said this is for your use or made it clear that it's for us, then in the monastic way of being, it's actually considered to be taking something that belongs to others. And so we in a way, it's very concrete for us. In the old tradition, and they still practice this in the Theravadan tradition, it needs to be offered into their hands, like directly to them. In our tradition, sometimes it's offered to the community in a ceremony and put on the shrine rather than directly to the person. In fact, when I was practicing in Sri Lanka, the monks would not, even if the food was served there, they would not be able to take the food and put it in their bowl unless the people who were offering the food placed their hands on the table and said, the food on this table or between my hands is offered for your use, this kind of thing. And then the monks can take that. It was considered to be not a good practice for monastics to take things that were not specifically offered to them. Or if a person, somebody else, if it had been offered to the monastics, then a person took it later, it was then, considered maybe it belonged to another person, so the monastics wouldn't take it. We're a little bit, we practice a little bit more fluidly in the Plum Village tradition, but there's still the mindset of really being aware and not imposing ourselves and just assuming that everything's for our use. It's a beautiful way of living simply, not taking something that hasn't been given to us, hasn't been put there for our use, and not just thinking that we're the center of the universe and everything revolves around us. So it's a nice practice actually to take a pause and to consider, especially in our context as monastics, but it's also true for any practitioners, to consider that whatever we have comes from the kindness of so many people. It's something very concrete for me, that the roof over my head, the electricity that's on, the food that I eat, the robes that I wear, the warm clothes that I have, everything comes from the kindness of others. It doesn't come from any of my own effort. So for me, it's very concrete. And so in that way, when I see that these things don't belong to me, these things have been given to me for my use and to help me have enough supportive conditions in order to practice, then it's incredibly humbling. And I want to take very good care of the things that I've been offered, and not to impose myself in so many ways or demand so many different things. For those of us who earn money or have jobs, we can also have a sense of like, oh, this belongs to me and things like that, which is fine, it's true. But also it can be helpful to consider how that thing that we've purchased for ourselves has come about through the work of a lot of work of some people. It might have also traveled over oceans, and to consider the resources that it's used. and really to see that it's not something, that's just come to us. It's come from a lot of resources, a lot of work, a lot of effort. And in that way, we really value what we have. We really see it as something very precious. And as you can probably imagine, the commentaries, they mention a number of ways in which taking what is not given can be committed. And as you'll hear later, I love lists. So I thought I'll just mention the traditional list because there's probably some other list lovers who are listening to this talk. The first is stealing. So basically taking the belongings of somebody else secretly, or like breaking into the house or pickpocketing and so on. For us here at Mountain Spring, we don't really have that much for anyone to steal. So that people can come in if they would like the Buddha statue and would make a good use of it, then you're welcome to it. So this is not something that we really personally need to worry about, but also in terms of like relating to others, not taking the belongings of others secretly. And that again could be material things or money or even ideas, not taking the ideas of others and claiming them as our own. Second is robbery, which is almost the same as stealing, but it's taking what belongs to others openly. And then the third is in the traditional listing is snatching, suddenly pulling them away before somebody has time to resist. And again, there's many layers of this. And the fourth is fraudulence. So gaining possession of another person's belongings by claiming that they're your own. The fifth out of the list is deceitfulness, using false weights and measures to cheat others. And for monastics, we also have the responsibility, we also see one of the responsibilities of practitioners is a responsibility of trust, not claiming to be something that we're not, in terms, and especially in terms of deceitfulness, to not claim that we have any attainments that we don't have. So the positive counterpart to stealing is, of course, honesty, which implies a sense of respect for ourselves and for the belongings of others, and for the right for others to use their belongings as they wish. And along with that sense of honesty, in terms of this practice of not taking what's not given, it's that sense of being contented with what we have, of knowing that we have enough, without having this inclination to increase our wealth by some means that are not so open. The most wonderful way to cultivate these qualities is through cultivating the quality of generosity. And we've spoken about this beautiful quality of generosity, this quality of giving, of not holding on to things in previous talks. And we've spoken in previous talks of the three traditional types of generosity: material gifts, gifts of the Dharma, gifts of non-fear, and the fourth kind, which is the willingness to receive. And I also feel that the most clear description of this training is the second mindfulness training in Plum Village. It makes this concrete practice very clear and easy to apply in our daily life. So the second mindfulness training is true happiness, aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression. I'm committed to practicing generosity in my thinking, speaking, and acting. I am determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others, and I'll share my time, my energy, and material resources with those who are in need. I will practice looking deeply to see that the happiness and suffering of others are not separate from my own happiness and suffering. That true happiness is not possible without understanding and compassion, and that running after wealth, fame, power, and sensual pleasures can bring much suffering and despair. I'm aware that happiness depends primarily on my mental attitude and not on external conditions. and that I can live happily in the present moment simply by remembering that I already have more than enough conditions to be happy. I'm committed to practicing right livelihood so that I can help reduce the suffering of living beings on earth and stop contributing to climate change. So every time I hear this second mindfulness training, I feel it's incredibly complete with its reflections on not taking what's not given to us, being aware of the impact of our actions, both in terms of interpersonal relationships and also in terms of resources on an individual and a collective level. The third aspect of right action is practicing sexual responsibility. And without necessarily wanting to let the mindfulness trainings give the Dharma talk, I do feel that the third mindfulness training of the 5 or the 14th mindfulness training of the Order of Interbeing express the practice of sexual responsibility in one of the most clear and complete ways possible. So I'll let the mindfulness training speak for itself. And so this is the 14th mindfulness training for lay members of the Order of Interbeing. Aware that sexual desire is not identical with love, and that sexual relations motivated by craving cannot dissipate the feeling of loneliness, but will create more suffering, frustration, and isolation. We are determined not to engage in sexual relations without mutual understanding, love, and a deep long-term commitment made known to my family and friends. Seeing that body and mind are not separate from each other, we are committed to learning appropriate ways to take care of our sexual energy and to cultivating loving kindness, compassion, joy, and inclusiveness for our own happiness and the happiness of others. We must be aware of future suffering that may be caused by sexual relations. We know that to preserve the happiness of ourselves and others, we must respect the rights and commitments of ourselves and others. We will do everything in our power to protect children from sexual abuse and to prevent couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct. We will treat our bodies with compassion and respect. We are determined to look deeply into the 4 kinds of nutriments and to learn ways to channel our vital energies, sexual, breath, and spirit for the realization of our bodhisattva ideal. We'll be fully aware of the responsibility of bringing new lives into the world and will regularly meditate upon their future environment. So the guiding principles of this precept, of this mindfulness training from a Buddhist ethical standpoint, are to help us learn to channel our energies well and to not treat ourselves and others or others' relationships as an object. So we've looked at the 3 traditional areas of refraining, which collectively are seen as making up right action. But as you know, if you were present for last week's talk, and as I've mentioned earlier this evening, then there's another aspect without which our ethics wouldn't be complete, and that is performing acts of benefit for self and others. And so I also felt, in addition to sharing about the tendency within our lives to become too busy, too engaged in doing, particularly when we're looking at right action, in addition to that aspect, and in addition to speaking about refraining, I thought to myself, if we speak about refraining, we need to speak about what aspects make up the performing aspect of right action as well, performing acts of benefit. And one formulation in the early Buddhist texts is something called the path of the 10 wholesome actions. And this is a very beautiful way to cultivate right action. And it'll be especially joyful for those of you who love lists. And I see you, I'm one of you. I like lists. And so Buddhism is really perfect for me because I love lists of things. The 10 actions, the 10 wholesome actions are divided into 3 bodily actions, 4 verbal actions, and 3 mental actions, all of which are said to cause unskillful qualities to diminish, while skillful qualities will flourish and grow. The 10 paths are discussed quite often in the Pali Canon. And so in terms of the bodily actions, the first is someone gives up killing living creatures. They put down the rod and the sword. They're scrupulous and kind, living full of compassion and empathy for all living beings. So this is the first one, and we've discussed this already this evening. And the second of the 10 wholesome actions is they give up stealing, taking what's not given. They don't, with the intention to commit theft, take the wealth or belongings of others from the village or the wilderness. The third is that they practice sexual responsibility, honoring themselves, honoring others, and others' relationships, and protecting minors. The verbal actions are a certain person gives up false speech. They're summoned to a council, an assembly, a family gathering, a guild, or to court, and they're asked to bear witness. Please say what you know. Not knowing, they say, I do not know. Knowing, they say, I know. Not seeing, they say, I don't see. And seeing, they say, I see. So they don't deliberately lie for the sake of themselves or for another or for some trivial worldly reason. The second of the verbal actions is they give up divisive speech. They don't speak in one place what they heard in another, so as to divide people against each other. Instead, they reconcile those who are divided, supporting unity, delighting in harmony, loving harmony, speaking words that promote harmony. It's very pleasant to be around a person like that, isn't it? And then the next is giving up harsh speech. They speak in a way that is mellow, pleasing to the ear, lovely, going to the heart, polite, likable, and agreeable to the people. And the fourth I particularly like. They give up talking nonsense. And last week we spoke about the different lists of nonsense, one of my favorite lists in the whole of the Pali Canon. They speak with words that are timely, that are true, and that are meaningful, in line with the teaching and the training. They say things at the right time, which are valuable, reasonable, succinct, and beneficial. Just that practice of saying things at the right time that are valuable, reasonable, succinct, and beneficial, that's a lifetime's practice right there. And then mental actions, the last aspect of the 10 wholesome actions. The first is cultivating contentment. They don't desire the wealth and belongings of others, thinking, oh, if only those belongings were mine. They have a kind heart and loving intentions. May these sentient beings live free of enmity and ill will. May they be untroubled and happy. So cultivating this sense of contentment and loving kindness. And then cultivating loving kindness itself. That's the second of the 10 wholesome actions and in the realm of mental actions. They're loving and they live with their heart full of love. They're kind and they live with their heart full of kindness. And then the third is, I wonder if you can guess what the third mental action is. That's right, it's cultivating right view. There's no escape from right view in the Buddhist path. It will appear over and over. Once my family and I were visiting a place, it was like a family holiday place, and there was very few staff, and so the same staff member showed up in many different areas. The same staff member took us on a bushwalk, And then the same staff member was the waiter in the restaurant. The same staff member was driving us in the shuttle bus, things like that. So in this same way, right view is the same kind of function in the Buddhist path. The right view will take you on a bushwalk, will be a waiter, will drive the shuttle bus for all the other qualities to emerge. Right view will keep appearing over and over again on the path. There's no escape from right view in Buddhism. So right view here is seen as knowing that it's important to transform our heart and mind, knowing that of understanding your situation, of knowing that transformation is necessary, and knowing that a path of practice is necessary to be able to have that transformation, of knowing that there are fruits and results of the things that we say, the things we think, and the things that we do, and that we have a lot of gratitude to so many beings, as we've spoken before, that we've seen a transformation in our life, and that we have confidence that we're walking the right path. This is seen to be right action. And so dear family, I hope that you have gotten a new understanding of right action in terms of the Noble Eightfold Path, the 3 different factors of right action, of not of protecting life, of not harming life, of not taking what's not given, of practicing contentment and true happiness, and also practicing sexual responsibility, but also those aspects of engaging in the 10 wholesome actions. So it's been such a delight to be together with you this evening, and I am looking forward to the discussions that we're going to be having over this week in the Compassionate Ocean Sangha. So thank you so much. Let's come back to our bodies, come back to our breathing, and we'll end with the sound of the bell.